Welcome back to the Female Athlete Summit, the online platform for female athletes, coaches, sports performance coaches, and parents. Today, I'm super excited to be talking to Dr. Sharon Wentworth because we're going to be talking about the ACL, how to help reduce the injuries in females, because we all know this is a huge problem. So Sharon, welcome to the call.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you because I know your husband, Bobby, you both kind of tie in the physical therapy aspect and then the sports performance. And I think bridging the gap is a really important piece we need to talk about when we're talking about reducing the ACL. But before we kind of get into that, tell everyone, I know you're an owner of a physical therapy. Tell everyone about yourself, how you got into it.
Okay, I will. Well, I was an athlete. You know, a lot of physical therapists say, I was playing sports, I got hurt, that's why I became a physical therapist. I actually didn't have a lot of injuries early on in my career. I played volleyball at West Virginia University and then switched over to the beach. And actually, I was in my third year of PT school when I tore my ACL. And at that point, I always knew I wanted to do sports physical therapy. And I knew that I wanted to open up my own facility, but I needed mentorship. So I took some years, got some great mentoring, worked at Monmouth University as their physical therapist, right out of the training room. That gave me this great opportunity to meet their orthopedic surgeons and to get really accustomed to working with athletes at that level. That time I also got my athletic training certification. I felt prepared, and I started my own business, but I had this really strong feeling that there was this gap in physical therapy where there was pediatric physical therapy, which was a lot of developmental work. And then there was general ortho physical therapy, which actually happens to be a very high percentage of an older population, a geriatric population, active adults and geriatric. And where were these 15-year-olds going that tore their ACL? And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I had a lot of support from the group of orthopedic surgeons in the area that I knew through Monmouth University. And so I also knew that you couldn't do that kind of rehab in a 20 by 20 room with like a physio ball and a total gym. So at that point, I put myself inside of a sports performance center that was already existing. And I used their space, their movement space, their equipment. And it took off. And I don't know how it took off because I had no real experience in running a business and I had some expensive learning experiences. But now that sports performance center that I was in for about 4 or 5 years ended up closing. I have found that a lot of sports performance trainer people who open gyms don't always have a great business sense either. I moved into another one. 5 years later, it closed. At that point, Bobby, my husband, was ready to start Ripped. So we decided we were going to open up our own place. We found this big warehouse, 16,000 square feet. We totally did the facility design as if it was like a Olympic training center. I had my physical therapy room. And it had always been a combination of physical therapy and sports performance because it was a natural evolution for my business, considering I see 100% competitive athletes. 80% of my caseload is high school athletes. So for me, the physical therapy education, it doesn't really give you a lot of high level strength and conditioning education. So I needed to find people to fill that missing gap that I was missing in my education. So right away, my very first employee was an exercise physiologist who was a CSCS. And it just made so much sense for me to be able to work with the athlete, what they needed manually, and a lot of program design, and then have a strength and conditioning specialist work with them in their higher level exercises as they got into their 4th, 5th months of their ACL rehab. The ACL thing became my specialty, first because I had torn my ACL, and just out of the nature of the population I was seeing. And so, Bobby worked for me off and on over the years, and eventually it just evolved into a melding of the two different fields together, physical therapy and strength and conditioning. And now my business could not run without it. So now I have 4 licensed physical therapists, and I actually have 6 strength and conditioning coaches that work just for me.
Wow.
Well, actually, they don't work just for me. They actually work split some time for me and with Ripped, which is really amazing because what that does is truly melds us together. So most of my strength coaches have gone through the Ripped internship. And because of that, the kids that are training in rehab are getting the same kind of system, the Ripped system that I also have played a role in the development over the years and am very confident with. And so when they finish with physical therapy at 6 months or however long they've been with me, they just flow right into Ripped. And it is such an easy transition because they've already been pretty much having the same kind of instruction, from the littlest of details, like how do we teach an Olympic lift, or what are the progressions? Well, they've already gone through that with us in rehab, which is virtually unheard of when you really look at the physical therapy environment. How many people in physical therapy are learning how to do, a clean? not many.
You're not.
But when you have a 16, 17-year-old athlete who has goals of going back to soccer and maybe college athletics, that's the type of lifting and that's the type of movement and the mechanics and all that kind of stuff that they need, but aren't getting in the general ortho environment. And so for me, it just makes so much sense. And everyone that comes in and in the strength and conditioning world, in the sports physical therapy world, they're like, yeah, this makes sense. Why aren't more people doing this? And that's a big question. I'm not quite sure.
I'm with you. I mean, I don't even know why, if you're a female athlete and you're competing at a high level in high school, let's say, and your goal is to play in college, how you've never strength trained in your life baffles me.
Exactly.
So random question. I don't know if you know the answer to this, because obviously each, by state physical therapy kind of laws are different. But if someone comes to see you for a knee injury, I've heard this in the past, again, not sure it's true. Is it true that like when you're writing out through insurance protocols that really the insurance companies like kind of only want you to treat the knee? They're not looking at the whole picture. So that's why a lot of physical therapists are like, let me just strengthen the knee. And they're not paying attention to maybe the core, the hip, or the ankle.
So the insurance industry, obviously, they're the bad guys right now. They're the ones that we are battling in terms of trying to educate and teach. They don't even want to pay. Listen, I can't write as my goal returning to sport because that's too high level of a goal. My goals have to be functional. So now we're talking about being able to walk up and down stairs, being able to get up off of a seat. And if I write in my notes, something about my patient had some apprehension or pain during soccer practice today, I get denied because if they're at soccer practice, they shouldn't be in PT. Like they are not understanding that these goals need so much time and such high level activity in order to safely return. This is also the reason why we have a pretty significant re-tear rate in our country. The insurances are just not paying for an adequate amount of physical therapy for them to truly be ready to get back to their sport. I mean, they're cutting them off after 3 months. They're still doing straight leg raises on the table. Now, in terms of the actual, I get this kind of thing a lot from people like Pat from Athletes Acceleration. We were talking about like how can a strength coach who owns a performance center have physical therapy? How can we do this? How can we make this happen? And talking about the legalities and the state-by-state rules. Well, here's the thing. Insurance companies will only pay for a physical therapist. They won't pay for in New Jersey, they won't even pay for an athletic trainer to do treatment. They won't pay for a strength coach. But you know what? A lot of physical therapy companies have a hard time surviving on just a physical therapist. And if it is going to be just a physical therapist one-on-one, that treatment is going to be about 45 minutes. And that is not a lot of time. I mean, someone sits on a bike for 10 or 15 minutes. So, it's like, this is not a lot of time. So the way so a lot of physical therapists, honestly, they have a $10 an hour high school kid following their patients around the gym just because of the money thing. I didn't want to do that. So from a business standpoint, financially, maybe it isn't like the best for my bottom line to have I have 6 strength and conditioning coaches. Some of them have master's degrees. They're all certified, and I have to pay them accordingly to their education and their experience. So that's important to me, and that's why I do that. But the way that I get around the kind of legal part of it is that I only bill for the time I'm with the patient. My ACLers are there for 2.5 hours easily. I can't bill for 2.5 hours of physical therapy. I mean, that wouldn't even be, I would like red flag me all over the place. But I bill for the unit of manual that I do, the time that I spend with them, the time that I actually do spend with them as a physical therapist, and the other hour and a half that they're with us. That's just me providing them with more, almost like an outside of physical therapy experience. And so I don't bill for the time that they're spent with a strength and conditioning coach, because an insurance company, they really only will pay for about 45 minutes to an hour anyways. So, I'm not fraudulently billing. I'm really just providing. It's almost like if they were to come to me and I bill for physical therapy, and then they go next door and talk to a nutritionist, or, they go work with a recruiting consultant or something like that. It's an extra part of my service that I'm offering to them that I feel is very important. But and that's what I had told to Pat, a corporate physical therapy place is going to have a hard time with my philosophy. They don't want to provide a service that they're not getting paid for, because it's really very much so about the bottom line. And so I always recommended that if you own a sports performance center and you want to put physical therapy in there, get a physical therapy owned practice where the physical therapist can make the decisions on billing and, the money situation, because then you guys can work together and make your own decisions. There's a lot more autonomy in a small private practice.
Yeah, makes sense. And I think you brought up some interesting points. So as a physical therapist, obviously I'm guessing you see a ton of ACLs and knee injuries. Why do you think females, or like the ACL rate, is increasing every year? I think a lot of people are like, well, there's more females participating in sports every year. And I get that. But like, why do you think, again, we're having this crazy knee, ACL epidemic that just keeps growing and growing every year?
I know. It's the craziest thing ever. I mean, I don't think I knew a single person in high school that tore their ACL.
I didn't either. And I played on like a highly ranked high school basketball team in the whole entire country.
Exactly. So I definitely have theories. And I mean, I will preface this by saying that these are my theories.
Fair enough. That's why, you're the expert. You're the one I'm speaking to. So I want your theories and opinions.
To do like hours and hours of research, I would, but I don't. I'd rather treat patients. So, okay. So I will first comment on why are there more ACLs in general, because I think people forget, because we get very fixated on the female and the fact that the females are tearing their ACLs so much. But you do have to realize that overall, there's more ACL tears than ever before. Males, females, NFL players. I mean, we're not even just talking about young players. There are more professional athletes tearing their ACLs than ever before. And so my theory when it comes to just overall ACL tears is there is a little bit of a situation going on, I feel, where we have evolved as athletes through technology, through nutrition, through better training techniques, and we're bigger, faster, and stronger than ever before, both male and female athletes. I mean, you look at like the combine, there's like a 6'7" guy running like a 4 or 5. Like that never used to happen. And so I truly think that there's been a little bit of a lag in the evolution of our skeletal system and our ligamentous system behind our musculus system. And we're moving so fast and so quickly that that ligament that's inside of our knee that's about this big, it just can't handle it. It can't handle the torque and the tension and the velocity of the movement. And it's a little bit of a flawed structure in that it can't handle that kind of movement. And so, you just get like the best athlete ever, an Adrian Peterson, running down the field and they just tear their ACL. Now, of course, you can't do anything if a 300-pound guy lands on your knee. But a non-contact injury, this is, the athletes that are tearing their ACLs right now, if you really kind of break them down, they tend to be the tenacious, the shiftiest, the quickest. It's usually not the kind of quiet girl sitting on the bench that's a little bit fearful. That's usually not the person tearing their ACL. It's really the ones that are moving their bodies so quickly through space. And then there's just a pure statistical component to this situation, where if you take the high-risk ACL sports, and we're talking soccer, I'm going to leave football out because football's not as many non-contact injuries. But if you look at soccer, basketball, lacrosse, those sports, that used to be a situation where you play school soccer, and so you'd play maybe 80 hours a year of soccer. So now you're putting yourself into a high-risk situation for 80 hours out of the year. And now you're playing year-round, and now you're playing 300 hours a year, and you're putting yourself into a high-risk situation for 300 hours. I always say it's like if you're a taxi cab driver, you're more likely to get in an accident because you're just putting yourself in a situation more time. And it doesn't, a lot of people think they equate this to like an overuse. Oh, they're playing all year round, they're overusing. It's not an overuse injury. It's not a tendonitis or an inflammation. This is, you could be perfectly healthy, perfectly fit, perfectly unfatigued, and still tear your ACL. So this is just, you put yourself out there in these situations, there's no higher risk of it, of a tear. So yeah, this year-round situation surely puts us at higher risk. Now, when it comes to the females versus males, there are more, it's not that there are more females tearing their ACLs. So if you look statistically, there's still a lot of males tearing their ACLs. But if you look at the likelihood of a female tearing their ACL over males, so there's still less females playing sports than males. So now statistically, the likelihood is very, very much higher for a female, up to 9 times higher. So that is a whole different group of kind of information of why now the females are tearing the ACLs. And so that is kind of what I have tried to delve into, because the things that us female athletes have going on are really the reason why people are tearing their ACLs in general. And so that's, now we start talking about us female athletes are not perfectly designed for the style and aggressiveness of sports that we're playing today. We have a perfect storm going on for this ACL injury, in that we have wider hips, which mean our femur bone's coming down at a greater angle. That angle, that inward angle, that valgus angle, is a component of most mechanisms of an ACL injury. So I say, like, just standing still, we're halfway to tearing our ACLs because we're actually standing in a valgus angle. So that, you just think of the physics of it, that's naturally the way our knee wants to go. Can we do anything about our wider hips that happen to widen as we're going through puberty, which is around 13, 14 years old, which is also when everyone's starting to tear their ACLs, all these girls? We can't do anything about that. Can we do anything about the fact that we have hormonal shifts throughout the month that lead to ligament laxity in certain times of the month? We can't do anything about that. Can we necessarily change the fact that we don't have the levels of testosterone that males have, so we can't build muscle the same way? So we'll never have the same muscle mass relative, or, body strength and all that kind of stuff. Nothing much we can do about that. What I have proposed in my chapter in the Athletics Acceleration book is that the only people who can actually make a difference in this war against the ACL epidemic are strength coaches and performance coaches. Because by the time they get to a physical therapist or their athletic trainer or an orthopedic surgeon, they've torn their ACL already. And so strength coaches are truly our only possibility of any kind of prevention or lowering the risk of this injury, for sure.
I 100% agree with you on that. But we talked about the minute. Why do you think that if, like, I think, again, you're very educated. I'm saying the same thing. I know your husband, Bobby's saying the same thing. Like, these girls need to strength train before they ever get injured. Why do you think we're having such a hard time getting these girls to strength train them? I mean, we have the information, and the parents will pay AAU. They'll pay for skill training. They'll pay for a nutritionist, but they won't pay for like a strength coach.
Right.
What are your theories, your thoughts on that? Like, why is it so hard to get most of these girls to get into the weight room or do some form of strength training?
You know, originally I feel like the first thought that people have is, oh, because girls don't want to get bulky or they don't want to do this. But you know what? I'm not sure that that's it anymore. Because I mean, it's most people in the sports world are figuring out that females need the same kind of training as males and that they're having the same kind of sporting opportunities and scholarships and all that kind of stuff. I went to a course years ago in Cincinnati, Dr. Frank Noyes, and he runs Sports Metrics, which was the very, very first ACL prevention program and has had the absolute most research done regarding ACL. And years ago, he sent out a survey to every sport club and every high-level sport club in the Cincinnati area, and said that the Cincinnati Sports Medicine is running a free program, and you can check the box. Would you rather have it be a sports performance program or an ACL injury prevention program? And over 90% said performance, and almost nobody checked the ACL injury prevention. And because first of all, if you haven't already torn your ACL, you feel a little immortal, especially when you're a high schooler. You know, you just don't think this is ever going to happen to you. And who wants to waste their time doing ACL prevention when they could spend their time just improving their sport? And it's interesting, Bobby actually said to me, so that would be like if a teacher said, do you want a program to get your grades better, or do you want a program so that you don't fail? Like, you're going to choose the program to get your grades better. That's just kind of a mentality thing, you know? And I have had similar experiences. I offered a free ACL program. Nobody came. It was really amazing. And then we decided for Bobby to basically offer the RIPT program, but call it an ACL program. And he didn't get as much participation. And it's really, I feel like it's kind of that thing. Nobody wants to admit that this could happen to them if it hasn't already happened to them. And the people who ended up coming to the ACL prevention were the ones who had already torn their ACLs. And so there's a little bit of this immortal type of thing. But in general, the feedback that we actually get is they just don't have time. They don't have time. They're doing their homework. They're doing, their soccer. They have soccer year round. They have soccer almost every day. And how are they, what about recovery? What if they go to soccer Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and then and Saturday tournaments, and then they do RIPT on Tuesday and Thursday? They don't have a single day off. And you know what? The fact is that's true. It is true. They don't have any recovery time. Recovery is important. How do they fit strength training into their schedule? And the whole like youth sports industry is going to have to shift. And so what's happening now, what we're trying to do is we're working with a soccer club that's local, like a mile down the road. They have their fields, and it's a huge club, and they have the DA program, and so very high level athletes. And we're literally trying to work the RIPT, two nights of RIPT into their soccer schedule so that it coincides with maybe a very light practice or just a skill practice. And then the RIPT is their other half of their practice. And that's what's going to have to happen. And at the very, very minimal side of it is we have developed these little warm-up programs that are considered a little bit of an ACL prevention. So they work a little bit on their movement dynamics. They take about 15 minutes, and you can teach it to the coach. That's the minimal, like the most minimal thing you could do, all the way up to these programs that are strength performance programs. And the thing is, and like what I say in my chapter is, it's not even prudent for you to call your program an ACL prevention program, because if it is a good, well-designed sports performance program that has adequate supervision so that every repetition is being supervised so that it's performed properly, that is an ACL prevention program. And so it's not something, the hardest thing I think for strength coaches now who are in the general population and their work, not like the college strength coaches, but doing private sector, is having the financial capability to have the ratio of trainers to athletes that you need so that all of the repetitions are properly supervised. If you're sitting on a ball and there's 50 kids out there on the turf and you're just yelling at them to jump, that's not good. Because what's happening is every single girl out there is jumping and their knees are coming together and you're not correcting it. So every repetition in a motor learning type of way is actually moving them in the wrong direction. And what they really need is every repetition to be a great repetition so that over time it can move into your involuntary part of your brain and you can bring that good movement pattern onto the field. And that's not happening. I truly believe that bad training is worse than no training at all. And there's a lot of kids getting not good training. And it's not out of the fault of necessarily the strength coach. Either they're unaware of what they should be looking for, or they just simply don't have the manpower to supervise all these repetitions. So it's tricky because not only do they have to get to strength training, they have to do it right. And it has to be a good program. And it has to be geared towards improving their risky movement patterns. Because that's the only place that we can change the girl thing.
I'm going to start going to the basketball court to work with some AAU teams, and it's taken a while to kind of just, put the foot in the door, doing what I'm doing. And if these coaches really want their athletes, because also AAU, this girl's going D1 full scholarship. It's only going to bolster your AAU program. Then you better add strength training. As we wrap up this call, you mentioned the book that you contributed a chapter for Athletes Acceleration, and I know you did a product with Bobby, training the female athlete. Just talk about that, and if people want to find out more about kind of training the female athlete, where they can look with the athlete acceleration stuff.
Sure. So the product that we did was an educational DVD on training the female athlete, and that was such a natural kind of thing for us to do out of our center, because RIP sees over 70% female athletes, and that had just developed mostly because since I see ACLs and so many girls tear their ACLs and then they progress to ripped, it wasn't like Bobby and Adam Fight, who was also one of the original members of Ripped and helped with the program design. They both played college football. So you would think we'd have a whole bunch of college football guys in there, right? And they just loved the working with the female athletes and the idea that we could really make a huge difference with this population, and that the girls came in with less egos. And it was such they just took it and ran with it. And the fact that in our community, they have this kind of reputation for being kind of the female athlete specialist is fine with them. They love it. They just go with it. And they, through working with me and working together, we have really, like I said earlier, just kind of perfected this thing of working rehab and physical therapy and into sports performance training. And so to come out with this product was so natural for us. And honestly, it's the entire RIP system. Because the truth is that you don't have to train a female and a male differently. You don't have to program design differently. What you do have to do is you have to cue slightly differently. And you have to look for a little bit different things in the same exercise. And so to provide the whole RIP system with a little twist on it, in that what can we specifically do when we're looking at female athletes, it's a way for us, for RIP, to get this information out to as many strength coaches as possible and try to affect as many athletes as possible. And then my segment in the DVD is really mostly just educational about why females tear their ACLs. Once you know why, it's easier for you to make good decisions as a strength coach. My chapter that I wrote with the Athletes Acceleration book specifically targets strength coaches. I mean, I'm calling them out. I'm like, listen, there is no one else that can do this but you, and you need to be at the forefront of this work. And, I've seen every day we were talking about like the Instagram presence. Every day I see college strength coaches putting on Instagram their college basketball girls doing hurdle hops or something like that. And every single one of them, their knees smacking together. Now they're putting this on Instagram thinking this is a great exercise. You don't put it on Instagram if you don't think it's good. And they don't know, or they're not seeing, or they just need to know what to look for. It's not a bad exercise. It's not being cued properly. And so that's what I really wanted to do with this chapter. And I used Timothy Hewitt, who is a biomechanist who has done tons of research on ACL prevention, his kind of breaking it down to make it really, really practical and usable for sports performance coaches and strength coaches to take this information and apply it. And that's really what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be too scientific, and you don't have to be a physical therapist by any means. As a strength coach, you have everything you need. If you know that females tend to have weaker external rotators, strengthen their external rotators. If you know their knees tend to go in, work on their mechanics when they're decelerating and jumping and landing. And it's really a very straightforward, this leads to this. I just wanted to kind of bring it to a place where it was so practical for them to apply.
Nice. I know Pat and I talked about, so we will put in the link to Training the Female Athlete, maybe the book. I got to talk to Pat, but we'll have them at the bottom, whatever link. Thank you so much. I think we have 3 of you speaking on the summit about kind of the ACL, and you're all offering a different perspective. So I think it's great to hear 3 physical therapists. So Sharon, thank you so much for all your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks, Jen.
Bye.